And what I want to do is I want to thank you all for coming today to this listening event. But before we get started with, if we could just take a minute to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Please stand. It's behind you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the States of America. One nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you all. Okay, with that, first thing I want to do is take a quick moment. Again, thank you all for being here today. K-State. Thank you to K-State for saying. You're tricking me, aren't you? They know I got a bad voice already, so we'll all right, so I want to thank K-State for setting this thing up and getting the microphones working. Thank you. With that, I want to just introduce the House Committee on Redistricting. I'm Chris Croft. I'm the chair. My vice chair is Representative Brad Ralph, to my right, and then the ranking member is Representative Tom Burrows. And then next to me is the Senate Chairman, Rick Wilburn. And Rick, if you want to introduce your members.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Rick Wilburn. I'm from the 35th Senate District, right south. My vice chair of the Senate Redistricting is the President, Ty Masterson, is Dinah Sykes to my left. Thank you.
Okay, with that, Senator Sykes, would you like to make an opening comment? Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you again to K-State for having us, and thank you all for joining us today. I think I speak from everyone on this committee, both the House and the Senate. You know, we want your help in this redistricting process, because that leads to healthier districts, healthier connections with your representative, stronger representation, and better public policy for all Kansans. So I hope this is not the first time and the last time that we hear from you. So please stay connected. Testimony, stay engaged. My staff has some sheets with contact information, so please feel free to get those at the end of the session. And again, thank you for joining us today.
All right, thanks, Senator Sykes. Okay, with that, thank you all for in the audience and for the committee members, both here in the audience and those online. There's a lot of folks online, and thanks for participating in this process. It's a very important process. This listening tour is for us to hear from you, the public, and it's just one step in the overall redistricting process, with our goal of getting to this with transparency and public access. That's our goal as we go through this. What you have to say is very, very important to us all. We are looking forward to becoming more familiar with your communities and hearing what you have to say, the things that we should consider as we are drawing the boundary lines in the future. Can we fix the mics? It usually check. Again, I'll just go back up real quick. Again, we're wanting to hear from you, but what we want to hear also is that we want to become very familiar with your communities and the things that you're concerned about as we're looking at drawing our boundary lines and how important and how to improve this overall process to benefit all of those involved. This, there was an online sign-up sheet. I have it right here. There were 3 that signed up online. There was 1 that signed up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it open for a few more minutes. If you want to sign up, I'll be glad to have you sign up on it if you want to speak as we go through that. If a speaker is more comfortable speaking in another language and it would ensure that the speaker's thoughts are more accurately portrayed, we encourage the speaker to use that language. We will have those comments translated and transcribed following today's meeting and provided to the committee members, to the legislative body as a whole, and to the public. We're also using closed captioning, both here in the room and online, but I know it's behind you, so we'll have to figure that out. This time around, redistricting is a little more challenging. As you know, the data has not been released yet. We know that they've commented that there will be some data that's released on the 12th, And when the research department gets up and talks, they're going to talk about the overall process and how that's going to play out. But what it does provide for us by holding these hearings right now is an opportunity to hear what you want us to consider and to think about specifically as we're sitting down and looking at the lines and again, and how to improve that process. So I just ask you, as you're going through your testimony, provide that to us. Give us some specifics, because that's really what we're looking for. And like I said, this is a listening tour and a long step. And to address the overall process, I'm going to turn the microphone over to the Kansas Legislative Research Department, to Jordan, to provide you that overview. Jordan? Thank you.
Check, check, check.
Test. Okay, I think we have the microphones working here. So I think I'm having a little bit of issues with my slides here, but I'll go ahead and continue on with my presentation. So some part of the census is constantly happening, and redistricting is part of this cycle. Federal law requires states have the opportunity to participate in census preparations, and states are required to participate to get census data for certain areas of the state. Participating in this data program, it provides states the opportunity to specify small geographic areas and to receive population totals for the purpose of redistricting. States must participate to receive population data for precincts within the state. And as I noted earlier, KLRD is a nonpartisan entity through which Kansas participates. And we've been the census contact for the last couple of cycles, including this cycle. And we've been working with them, updating maps, local maps for the past few years here as part of this process. And I'll get into some of these phases in just a second. And also I wanted to note that the census data program is broken into 5 phases. It begins in the year ending in 5 and concludes in the year ending in 5. So this current cycle we've been participating in since 2015 with the census. The next slide's got a list of the 5 phases. So phase 1 is a block boundary suggestion project, which began in 2015. Phase 2 is a voting district project. And that was the phase that I noted where we made some updates to local county maps and city maps as submitted to us. And then we delivered those back to the census. And these are just changes that these local cities have made. It's not to any of these state lines. Phase 3 is the delivery of census data. So currently we're between phases 2 and 3. As was noted earlier, we are expecting some of the preliminary data to be released on August 12th. That had been previously said it would be here August 16th, but they moved it up a few days. And those legacy files, those will take a little bit of time to work through to extract that data. And then the most user-friendly data is anticipated by September 30th of 2021. Phase 4, as you can see, is confirmation of the district boundaries for both state and congressional. And then phase 5, which is at the end of that 10-year cycle, is feedback from the census. In 2020, of course, the test. So my next slide is on 2020 apportionment. Of course, on Census Day, is the day that the count happens. It's the count at that point in time. The census released some preliminary data earlier this year. What we received is the total state population. That's the only number we received. But that number was used to determine congressional apportionment. I just wanted to note that the population of Kansas, as you can see on the screen, 2,937,880, and that was good for a gain of 84,762 persons since 2010. And Kansas did not gain or lose a congressional seat for this cycle. Moving on to the adjustment, I just have a slide here about some information on the adjustment. Previously, from 1988 through 2019, the Secretary of State adjusted, and if it happened this time around, it would be the number that I just told you would have been adjusted. But the total population was adjusted to account for military and students to count them in the place where they were from instead of the town where they were counted at. In 2019, the legislature passed a concurrent resolution, which was added to the 2019 November ballot and approved by voters, and it removed that requirement for adjustment. The next slide is about the redistricting process. So I just wanted to highlight for you all that it's really a legislative process. The legislature proposes on, votes on, and approves maps. These legislative proposals become bills. They're subject to the committee process, and in those committee hearings, folks can come in and testify on the different maps that are up for consideration. Amendments can be made, things like that. And so it really goes through the whole legislative process. The legislature will propose, vote on, and approve congressional, Kansas House, Kansas Senate, and Kansas Board of Education district maps. The governor, as part of this process, and just like with other bills, she'll either sign, veto, or allow to become law without signature. And then the Kansas Supreme Court is required to review and approve the state maps. The next slide here provides a little bit more detail on the approval process. So after the legislature approves maps, they're published in the register. Then the Attorney General is required to petition the court to determine the validity. And then the court has a certain deadline from filing to enter judgment. If the court says that the maps are valid, the process is complete until the next cycle. And then the next slide has the steps of what happens if the court says the maps are invalid. At that point, they'd be redrawn, and then there's some other steps involved, specifically if that happens. On my next slide here, I just wanted to highlight some of the resources KLRD has available for the public and for the legislature. So each of these maps is subject to a review, and reports are generated as part of that review process. So you can see here, we still have the reports up for 2012, so you can see examples of all the different types of reports that were run for each of the different maps. And you can access all that information on the KLRD redistricting webpage at ks.gov. And then you can access the redistricting page from our homepage. And like I said, similar reports are run for each of the proposed maps that's subject to a technical review. And then finally, I just wanted to have our contact information listed here. So you can see our address in the State House. We have our legislative website listed here. And then to contact staff with questions, you can either contact our redistricting email at redistricting@klrd.ks.gov, or we've got our individual staff emails listed here as well. So I believe that concludes my presentation. Does the committee members have any questions for me?
Actually, what I'd like to do is open it up to the audience. Do you have any questions of the speaker as it relates to the topic and content of what he just said? Right. Seeing none? Aware. I'm sorry. Yeah, please come on up to the microphone then. You have to come to the mic because there's people online that want to hear what you have to say, sir. And please state your name.
Jerry Marsh.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question about what he said regarding the courts. Is that the federal court you were alluding to or state court? I thought the way it sounded, I thought you were talking about the federal court could have a role in this process. Great.
Thank you for the question. I was discussing the state court process. There is a mandated review process after the legislature approves maps. Not in the statutory process I was discussing.
Yeah.
I read recently where Chief Justice Roberts said that the Supreme Court, federal courts have no role in the redistricting process. Is that true?
So as part of our statutory review process, it includes the state Supreme Court in this process. That's a separate process altogether. Not in the statutory review process.
I think that's outside the purview of him answering that question. He's just answering what this role is today for him. Okay, Brad, do you want to say something? Okay. Okay, obviously, okay. Any other questions or comments, sir, up front?
David Norland, Salina, Kansas. I believe what Mr. Marsh was referring to was that in the 2012 readjustment, reapportionment, which some of you were present for, you may remember that an independent commission was appointed at the as demanded by the Supreme Court. That, according to Chief Justice Roberts, is no longer allowed. Is that true? Can the state Supreme Court direct the legislature to appoint an independent commission?
Please, Jason, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Jason Long with the Office of Revisor of Statutes, legal counsel for the legislature. To address the first gentleman's question, the Supreme Court of the United States did rule that the federal courts would not be involved in issues of partisan gerrymandering. There is, however, federal law that allows for lawsuits when there is a challenge under other grounds for redistricting plans. Those lawsuits go before a 3-judge panel at the federal district court level, and then immediately can be appealed straight to the U.S. Supreme Court, bypassing the Intermediate Court of Appeals. To answer the second gentleman's question, no, there is no mechanism in Kansas law for the Kansas Supreme Court to order for an independent, nonpartisan commission appointed by the legislature. That would have to be either a constitutional amendment or a statutory enactment of the legislature.
Okay. Thank you very much. Jordan, thank you for your comments and your presentation. What I'd like to do now is I want to move on. Before I go to the next part, I failed to do something earlier, and I need to rectify that. We do have in the audience today, or in our group today, we have 2 members of the House We have the Speaker of the House, Speaker Ron Reichman. I want to welcome him, and the House Minority Leader, Tom Sawyer. So thank you, gentlemen, both for being here today. All right, now with that, now we want to receive public comments on, again, on your communities and the things to consider when we're drawing the lines, when we're drawing district boundaries, and ways to improve this process. So again, so just think about it. When we're sitting there doing this, what do you want us to be thinking about? We will have 5 minutes per speaker. Some of you have previously signed up and sent in some lengthy comments, which is great. We really appreciate that. And those documents are available to each of the members here. They are posted on the legislative webpage for the redistricting committee. And if anybody wants to provide comments later, there's no suspense, just go ahead and submit it. Please submit the comments to redistricting@klrd.ks.gov, or you can go on the website, ksledgeresearch.org, and provide that input. There is no cutoff date, again, for that data or for that comment, and send it in. The legislative website does provide instructions for providing your comments, and we do ask that you follow the instructions. Now that we've dispensed with all that administrative stuff and getting ready, again, 5 minutes. The vice chair, Representative Ralph, he has signs, and when he shows it up to you like this and it says 2 minutes, that's how much time you have remaining. And then he'll work that all the way down till it says your time ends. We provide that to you so you can start wrapping up your comments and thinking through and making sure you provide what you want us to know and what about your community. With that, we will jump into the first speaker. We have Lori Troe. Did I say that correctly? Yes, ma'am. From the League of Women Voters of Salina. Please, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, members of the community, of the committee, my name is Lori Troe, and I am president of the Salina League of Women Voters. Thank you for providing an opportunity for our community to speak to you today on a matter of great importance to all Kansans. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that supports citizen involvement in public policy at all levels of government and has been actively involved in advocating for creating fair districts in Kansas for many decades. Without detailed 2020 census data, we cannot make suggestions about the composition of fair districts at this time. We would like to point out two redistricting practices involving the redistricting database that are troublesome from our nonpartisan perspective and in terms of fairness. First, we urge the committee to reject the proposed redistricting guideline addressing contests between incumbents. The guideline appears to protect incumbents, which may lead to unfairness in future elections. Similarly, the committee should see to it that legislators' home addresses are not included in the redistricting database. Second, election results and/or voter registration information should not be included in the redistricting database. The only reason for such data to be available to map makers is to allow them to pick and choose safe areas for inclusion in new districts. The League has long held that practices such as these stand in the way of creating fair districts. Finally, I must comment on arrangements for this listening tour. Hearings are both important for legislators who make decisions for the public, whose voice may be either stifled or amplified by those decisions. The League appreciates the committee's willingness to devote time to listening across the state, but is troubled by the compressed schedule and the short notice prior to the start of this tour. This situation has made it difficult for ordinary Kansans to prepare and present pertinent information that will help you in your deliberations. Likewise, no one, including yourselves, has had an opportunity to see detailed census results and identify what changes are required to maintain equality of population in our districts. We ask that you follow up this listening tour with additional well-publicized and widely accessible opportunities for Kansans to participate in this process after the census data are available and prior to the start of the 2022 session. This will enable you to learn what your constituents identify as their communities of interest and fair representative districts. Announce opportunities for additional input at least 2 weeks in advance. This will save much time and expense if those opportunities include the ability to submit virtual testimony. Thank you today for your time and attention.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, our next speaker will be David Norland, private citizen. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Representative Croft. My testimony in its essence is before you in a written form, but I wanted to comment briefly on how Kansans see elections playing out, and it's not unique to Kansas. There are all kinds of metaphors around plays, advertising, what's fair campaigning, what's not, etc. But as I'm sure you're very aware, what this committee will do is to lay out the playing field on which that game is played. And if you, for example, have a 50-yard line that for one side is moved to the 30, the other side is moved to the 70, it's clear to see how unfair that process would be. So we're relying on you, and I think this is the appropriate place to say that what the legislature should do is establish an independent commission and not undertake it. With all due respect to the 20 or so legislators here, say 10 independent commissioners might resonate better with the public as well. I'm here specifically to comment on my experience running for office in Salina. I also ran for the Senate in Concordia in 2000. But my experience here in Salina is that there is an area of Salina generally described as West Central. And I don't have computer models to draw those boundaries precisely. But that area, which is comprised of people who are more likely to be in need of state assistance or state aid, or more likely to require income assistance, et cetera, those who are perhaps generally less well off, is divided between the 69th and 71st districts. The net effect of that, therefore, is that at least in theory, there's a possibility that those people will not be represented. So that would be one example. I have a friend in West Wichita near Goddard who has commented, this is in my written comments, that by the way that district is drawn, there is a preponderance of influence of the rural voters outside and a small segment of the Wichita more urban population there. While you cannot say that these people are more likely to vote progressively, there is an argument to be made that their vote is also diffused, similarly to Wichita. So I would also make one last comment. Seems like the commentary among commenters in the state has a widespread concern about Wyandotte County. As an example, if Wyandotte County is split up, then the influence of its voters are also split up. Lawrence has been dissected widely. So there are many examples of existing redistricting that might need to be corrected. I know that you're drawing all new lines, but I would urge you to A, be as fair as possible, and B, appoint an independent commission. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is going to be Paula Rogie. Did I say that correctly? Rogue? Oh, man, I'm sorry. My apologies.
It's Reggie.
Reggie, okay. Yes, ma'am. Please.
Hi,
Welcome.
I am Paula Reggie. I am from Concordia, and I am the chair of the 1st District Democrats for Kansas. While I'm here as the chair of the KDP 1st District, I'm also here as a citizen of North Central Kansas, a rural area. It simply does not make any sense to include any part of Wyandotte or Johnson County in the 1st District. Our rural voters have little in common with city voters of Kansas City and the surrounding area. The people of the 1st District deserve elected officials who are dedicated to forwarding their rural issues, which are very different from those in Wyandotte and Johnson County. And I'll say it again just to be clear. The needs of Wyandotte County, the needs of Johnson County are very different from those of the first district. And we simply do not have common interests. I don't see, personally, I don't see any need for much change in the district boundaries other than slight adjustments for population movement. And I'd like to see that change made in Marshall County. If we add an area, it should be in Marshall County so that it is no longer split up. That's all I have. So thank you for your time.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, next up will be Jerry Marsh, private citizen, Ellsworth County. You want to? Okay, no worries, sir. All right. All right, then the next one is going to be Janice Morse.
Thank you, and thank you for having this meeting today. I appreciate being able to speak. I'm going to be extremely brief. We do not need Wyandotte County or Johnson County in the first district. As Paula said, we're a rural entity, and the travel distance that the representative would have to do is a lot, miles and miles, and already the first district is so big that most candidates take them the entire campaign season to travel at one time. So it does not need to be bigger. And my second comment is, I think I agree with Mr. Norland that we need an independent commission to draw the lines, but I also think it should be computerized and the committee should make tweaks and adjustments to the computer drawing. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right, the next one is Alan Joka. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. My comments are kind of general in nature, but I have one specific thing I want to ask for at the end. My attention was drawn to a quote earlier today that I'd like to read. This is from Benjamin Franklin. He once said, our new Constitution is now established. Everything seems to promise it will be durable. But in this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes. Everybody's familiar with the last part of that quote, obviously, but the first part, I would suggest most of you are not. And I admit that I wasn't. You know, our democracy faces great threats today in our country. I would suggest the three biggest are the following. Number one, we have a significant percentage of people in the country that won't accept the results of a free and fair election, not the least of whom is a losing candidate. Secondly, the proliferation of soft money in our system. And thirdly, rampant gerrymandering, the practice whereby the elected individuals choose their voters instead of the other way around. So my main purpose really in coming here and standing up today was just to express my extreme displeasure. That's about as nice as I can say it politely, with the fact that the legislature just did not do what needs to be done. I don't understand all the procedural hurdles. I know that there's things you've got to go through, but we should have some sort of independent redistricting committee in Kansas. And in fact, I would argue that the future of the country depends on it. But barring that, I think the fundamental key is fairness. You know, at some point you got to take off your Wildcat and Jayhawk hat and do what's best for the citizens of the state. And the underlying principle has to be fairness. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was the last person signed up. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the group? Seeing none? Well, I want to thank you. I'm sorry, I did. Oh, thank you. Okay. Yes, sir. Welcome, and please state your name.
Hey,
Hey.
Mr. Chairman, colleagues, this is State Representative Stephen Howe. I'm dressed down for the occasion today, but I was out working in the field, so please excuse my attire. But as I was doing some work out in the field today, I kind of thought about some things. You know, you're going to be faced with a lot of numbers when it comes to redistricting. It's quite the big puzzle to put together, right? You got House districts, Senate districts, school board districts, U.S. House districts. All these things have to fit together in some way. But beyond the numbers, I want you to remember that those numbers represent people. There's people that work hard and toil with their hands and get dirty and they work to provide for their families. There's people working in hospitals, working beyond their normal shifts to try to keep communities safe. So as you look at these numbers, I want you to think about those people that we all represent and that we're sworn to, I guess, represent when we take our oath of office. You know, I do have 13 years of congressional experience. I worked for 2 different members of Congress, and I do relate to some of the sentiment by my fellow citizens behind me. In 2012, you know, the legislature just didn't get the work done. So 3 federal judges had to do the work of the legislature. So I would recommend that the legislature, that we work, set a hard deadline. Let's get things done and moving, set a hard deadline and not wait till the last minute, because I know that caused a lot of concern for people that were trying to file for office. So I appreciate you coming to Salina today, to K-State Polytechnic, taking the time out of your schedules to travel around and listen to constituents all over the state. And I wish you the very best. And I look forward to seeing you in January. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to speak? Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, welcome again, and please just state your name for everybody.
Yes, my name is Ann Zimmerman, and I am from Salina. I'm an elected school board member here. I wanted to say that for any future tours, it would be helpful if we had more advance notice, as some others have said. It would also be helpful if you gave a little more specifics about what you're wanting to know. I've heard to talk about Johnson and Wyandotte County, that they shouldn't be in the first district. My impression is the only reason that you would divide up Wyandotte County would be to split up the Democratic stronghold that's there. I don't agree that we have nothing in common with them. I think we all have a lot of things in common, but it's true that we have some different interests out in the rural areas. I hope that you will have respect for the idea that Kansans are not all an identical political leaning, and you will avoid the technique of packing and cracking, which you can look up on the internet and see a very helpful explanation of that with an election of the pennies versus the dimes. It's a short video that tells how you can eliminate your opposing party's power and consolidate power in your party. That is not the best way to divide up Kansas. So the Independent Redistricting Commission seems like a very much more fair way to go, which others have already talked about. I did receive a number of emails about this event here. Nothing said very much about it, what you needed to hear. I don't believe any of the notices I got came from your committee or from the legislature. They were from smaller groups around that were hoping that someone would show up since there wasn't much notice of it. So a lot more advance notice would be helpful, a lot more information about what you need when you are here. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Any others in the audience? Please, ma'am. And again, welcome and please state your name.
Hello, my name is Christy Newing and I'm a resident of Salina. Without detailed 2020 census data, I can't make suggestions about the composition of fair districts at this time. No one, including yourselves, has had an opportunity to identify what changes, if any, need to be made. I'd ask you to hold additional meetings once everyone has this information available to them. I had a terrible time finding this place today. I've lived in Salina 11 years, but I've never been here. So this made it very difficult to find. Again, I just got short notice of this. So I just ask that you be transparent. I ask that you treat your constituents fairly and give us all the information we need so that we can help you get the information you need. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Any others in the audience? Okay, with that, again, we want to thank you all for your input and your very specific answers that you gave us. That's going to be very helpful. We agree we want to be transparent as we're going through this process, and we believe, this is the first time ever that we've made sure all these things are available online, they're taped, and they're for your viewing as you go through. So we're trying to make every effort to make it as transparent as possible, and we want to thank you for that help in making the transparency and for the public, getting the public information. Again, this was our second of our 14 stops that we're doing in this listening tour. We've already made Manhattan today. We're here. We go to Hayes later today. And then we're off to Colby, Garden City, and Dodge City, and Hutchinson, Wichita, and Chanute, Pittsburgh, Overland Park, and Kansas City, Kansas. And then we'll finish up with Leavenworth and Lansing on this tour. Again, this is not the only time for input. There's a lot of time for input. And speaking of what you said, is that we want to hear from you. So please make sure you tell us what's going on and be specific and help us to see what we need to see. As mentioned earlier, an online submission of comments is always welcome, and we will have formal hearings and testimony when we return for session as well. We are working through what we will do officially after this tour and before the next session begins. Again, thank you to K-State for setting this up. Clearly the microphone problem was mine. And thank you all again and the committee members for being here. Drive safe to the next location. Our next stop is going to be Hayes at 6 p.m. Thank you all. We are adjourned.